All right, so let's dive into something pretty interesting today. We're going to be talking about something called smoke testing, and it's all about making sure the essential parts of something are working before you spend like a ton of time and effort on it. And we've got a great article here to guide us. It's called Smoke Testing: The Initial Check for Quality Assurance. And, you may be thinking, software development, not my thing. But trust me, this concept goes way beyond just code. It's really about making sure that the foundation of anything you're building is solid before you start building more on top of it. Think about it like this. You're baking a cake. You wouldn't start decorating it before you made sure that the batter was good, right?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Yeah, smoke testing is all about catching those potential disasters early on. It's that initial check to see if there's any metaphorical smoke coming out
Mm-hmm.
before you put in all the effort.
So where does this term even come from? It sounds kind of dramatic, right?
It actually has roots in hardware testing, like way back when engineers would literally power up a new piece of equipment. And they would just look for actual smoke. No smoke. Good sign. Meant that the core components were working.
Wow, that's a really cool visual, like watching for actual smoke signals. So how did this translate to the world of software?
Well, think of those wisps of smoke as like red flags in the code. Smoke testing in software is all about quickly identifying those red flags early on so that developers don't waste their time building on a shaky foundation. It's like making sure that the walls are stable before you start hanging pictures.
Okay, so it's about catching problems early. But what are the real like benefits of doing this? Why is this so valuable?
Well, one of the biggest benefits is efficiency. Smoke testing saves a ton of time and resources in the long run. Imagine you're building a huge e-commerce platform. The smoke test would focus on like the most crucial functions. Can users log in? Can they search for products? Can they add items to their cart? Can they actually complete a purchase?
I see what you mean. So if those core functions are broken, there's no point in even worrying about all the fancy stuff, right?
Exactly. Smoke testing helps you avoid wasting time and effort on all the bells and whistles.
Hmm.
If the foundation is like crumbling underneath.
And the article gave this example of an e-commerce platform where they caught this major bug, like a login bug, through smoke testing. And if they hadn't found that early on, it could have been a disaster. Like, imagine launching a website where no one can even log in.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of how smoke testing can mitigate risk. By identifying those critical problems early, you're saving yourself from potential headaches down the line and even like damage to your brand reputation. It's about making sure that basic user experience is smooth before you get into like all the finer details.
Okay, so I'm totally getting the importance of catching those issues early and avoiding wasted effort. But I'm also curious about how smoke testing fits into like the bigger picture of software development. I mean, there are other types of testing too, right? Like sanity testing and regression testing.
You're right, there are different types of testing, and each one has its own purpose. Think of it like this. Smoke testing is your quick checkup. You're making sure that the engine starts and the lights work. Sanity testing is more like a targeted diagnosis. You're focusing on a specific issue that's popped up. And then regression testing is all about making sure that fixing one problem hasn't created new ones elsewhere. So you're ensuring that everything still works smoothly after making changes.
Okay, that makes those distinctions a lot clearer. So smoke testing is like that initial essential check to ensure those core functions are working before moving on to the more specialized tests.
That's a great way to put it. It's about laying a solid foundation for the rest of the development process.
Okay, so we've got like the what and the why of smoke testing down. But how does this actually happen? Like, do you need a special lab coat and goggles to do smoke testing?
Not quite, though that would be a fun visual. There are actually like a few different approaches to smoke testing. You've got manual testing, automated testing, and then kind of a hybrid of the two.
Okay, let's break those down. What exactly does manual smoke testing involve?
Manual smoke testing is basically what it sounds like. A tester manually goes through those critical user flows. So they're clicking buttons, they're entering data, basically acting like a regular user would
Hmm.
to see if everything is working as expected.
I can imagine that could be pretty time consuming, though, especially for larger applications.
You're absolutely right. Manual testing is often a good starting point,
Yeah.
especially for smaller projects. But as applications grow and become more complex, automation becomes increasingly important.
So tell me about automated smoke testing. Does this involve like robots taking over the testing process?
Well, not robots exactly, but close. Automated smoke testing uses specific software tools to run those tests automatically. So think of it like having a tireless digital assistant going through those key user actions and reporting back any issues. It's a huge time saver, especially for teams that are constantly updating and releasing new versions of their software.
That sounds super efficient. So where does the hybrid approach come in?
A hybrid approach basically combines the best of both worlds. So you might automate the more straightforward tests, like login and search functionality, but then you'll have human testers handle the more intricate processes that require human judgment. So it's about finding that right balance for your specific project needs and resources.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the practical side of this, but I think it would help to see a concrete example. Remember that e-commerce platform we talked about earlier? Let's actually walk through some specific smoke test cases for that.
Great idea. So let's say you're building an online store from scratch. What are those absolute must-have functionalities that need to be working flawlessly before you even think about all the more advanced features?
Well, first and foremost, user login has to be rock solid. Can people create new accounts? Can existing users log in without any issues? That's like the gateway to the whole experience.
Absolutely. You don't want people getting stuck at the very first step right.
Yeah.
And then once they're in, they need to be able to find what they're looking for. So product search is another critical smoke test area.
Yeah, we've all been there. You search for something on a website and you get a bunch of completely irrelevant results. It's so frustrating. It's a quick way to lose customers.
Exactly. So testing that search function thoroughly is essential. Then you've got to make sure people can actually add items to their shopping cart. Can they select products, choose quantities, and add them to their cart without any glitches?
Yeah, this all seems pretty basic, but any hiccups here could lead to people abandoning their purchases.
You're right. It's about ensuring that those core user actions are seamless and intuitive. And of course, we can't forget the grand finale, the checkout process.
Right. Can users smoothly enter their shipping and payment information? Do they receive a confirmation once the purchase is complete? This is like the culmination of the entire user journey, so it needs to be flawless.
Exactly. And what's really clever about these smoke test cases is that they focus on the most critical user paths. These are the actions that users absolutely must be able to perform to achieve their goals on the platform. By targeting these areas, you're ensuring that the basic user experience is solid before you dive into the more complex stuff.
Okay, this all sounds great, but I know that our article also mentions some challenges. When it comes to smoke testing, what are some of the things to watch out for?
One of the key limitations is test coverage. By its very nature, smoke testing focuses on the essentials, which means there's always a chance that some less critical but still important functionalities might slip through the cracks. So it's important to remember that smoke testing is just one part of a comprehensive testing strategy.
So it's not like a foolproof solution, it's more like a first line of defense.
Precisely. Another challenge is keeping those smoke tests up to date. Software is constantly evolving and changing. Features are added, designs are tweaked, code is constantly being updated. And if your smoke tests aren't evolving alongside the software, they become less effective at catching those potential problems.
Yeah, it makes sense. Especially in today's world of software development, things are changing all the time.
You're right. And that's actually one of the advantages of automated smoke testing. It's generally easier to update those automated scripts as the software evolves, compared to manually retesting everything.
So automation helps streamline that process and keep things running smoothly. But even with the best designed smoke tests, isn't there still a chance of false positives, where the software passes the initial checks, but still has hidden issues lurking beneath the surface?
That's a really good point. False positives are definitely a real possibility. It's crucial to remember that smoke testing isn't a guarantee of flawless software. It's more like a safety net to catch those major obvious issues early on.
So how do you minimize the risk of those false positives sneaking through?
One key strategy is to make sure your smoke tests are challenging enough. They need to be robust and actually push the software to its limits within those core functionalities. If your tests are too basic or too narrow in scope, they might miss those subtle but still important issues.
So it's about striking that balance. Comprehensive enough to catch those major issues, but not so complex that they slow down the development process.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. And this is where good test design and a deep understanding of the software's architecture really come into play. You need to think about how users will interact with the system and design tests that mimic those real-world scenarios.
So it's not just about checking boxes, it's about understanding the user's perspective and creating tests that reflect how the software will actually be used.
That's a great way to put it. And, even if a smoke test does give a false positive, it's still valuable information. It might indicate that your tests need to be refined or that there are areas of the code that need further scrutiny.
So it's a continuous learning process, refining those tests and adapting them as the software evolves. Speaking of continuous learning, our article also highlighted the importance of documentation when it comes to smoke testing. Why is that?
Documentation is essential for a couple of reasons. First, it provides a record of what was tested and the results, which is valuable for tracking progress, identifying recurring issues, and ensuring that everyone on the team is on the same page.
So it's about having a clear history of what's been tested and the outcomes.
Exactly. But documentation goes beyond just record keeping. It's also a tool for improving the process itself. By carefully documenting the results of your smoke tests, including any bugs that were found, you can start to identify patterns. You might notice that certain modules or functionalities
Okay.
tend to have more issues than others, and this information can be incredibly valuable for guiding future development and testing efforts.
It's like having a treasure map that points you toward those potential problem areas.
That's a great analogy. By using those documented insights, you can focus your testing efforts where they're most needed and ultimately create more robust and reliable software. And this documentation can even inform broader quality assurance strategies within the organization.
So it's about constantly learning from those smoke tests and using that knowledge to improve the entire development process.
Absolutely. Especially in today's world of agile development, where things are constantly changing and evolving, it's crucial to regularly review and update those smoke tests and their associated documentation. Are they still relevant? Are they covering the most important functionalities? Are they actually catching potential problems? These are the questions you should be asking on an ongoing basis.
It's about staying adaptable and making sure your testing practices are aligned with the ever-changing landscape of software development.
Exactly. Smoke testing, when done effectively, is a powerful tool for ensuring software quality. But it's not a one-and-done activity. It's an ongoing process of refinement and improvement.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from what smoke testing is and why it's so valuable, to how to do it effectively, and even some of the challenges involved. But before we wrap things up, I think it would be interesting to take a step back and think about how these principles of smoke testing could be applied outside of the world of software development.
I love that idea. What's so fascinating about these seemingly technical concepts is that they often have broader applications. We've been talking about software, but think about planning a big event before you get into the nitty-gritty of decorations and catering. Wouldn't it make sense to smoke test the essentials?
I like where you're going with this. So in the context of event planning, what would those essential smoke tests be?
Think about it. Have you secured the venue? Do you have a confirmed date and time that works for all the key people?
Hmm?
Are there any permits or licenses you need to obtain? Those are your critical functionalities. If those aren't in place, all the finer details become irrelevant.
You're right. It's like making sure the stage is set before inviting the audience. And I bet this concept could even apply to something like writing. Before you get lost in flowery prose and fancy metaphors, you could smoke test your outline. Are the main arguments clear? Does the structure make sense? Catching those fundamental flaws early on could save you a lot of rewriting later.
Exactly. And it's not even just about like catching problems. It's also about building confidence, you know?
Oh, that's such a good point. If
Yeah.
that initial smoke test passes, you can move forward knowing that you've got a solid base. It's like that sigh of relief when you realize you remembered to pack your passport before you headed the airport.
I love that analogy. It really captures that feeling. Whether you're building software, planning an event, or even just like tackling a complex task at work, that feeling of confidence,
Yeah.
knowing that the essentials are covered, it can make a huge difference.
Okay, this has been a fantastic deep dive into the world of smoke testing. We've covered what it is, why it's so valuable, how to do it effectively, and even how those principles can be applied to other areas of our lives.
It's been a pleasure exploring all these different facets of smoke testing with you. It's amazing how something that seems so technical can actually be so relevant to so many different aspects of our lives.
So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a challenge. Think about your own life, your work, your current projects. Where could you apply this concept of smoke testing? What are those essential elements that need to be in place before you dive into all the details?
And maybe it's like checking in with your team to make sure everyone understands their roles on a new project
Yeah.
before you dive into all the specific tasks.
Mhm.
Or maybe it's about making sure your workout gear is ready to go before you commit to that early morning gym session.
Exactly. The possibilities really are endless. And we would love to hear your thoughts on this. Share your aha moments, any specific situations where you've used smoke testing principles, or even just some creative ways you could apply this concept in the future.
We're all about making knowledge practical and applicable, so let's keep this conversation going.
Until next time, keep those smoke signals clear.